The temporary breakup between Mark and Amber in season 1 was messy, but I also think it was very important and an interesting one. But when it finally happened, the discussion was disappointing. I think that both people had some really good points to make, but the show itself seemed to be only interested in arguing Amber's side of the argument, basically leaving Mark no room to make his own case. And I think it was that which began the spark, watching Mark being pushed into a corner by his girlfriend and his own friends, while we, the audience, know the emotional and physical torment he's been through this past season, only helped to make the internet turn on Amber. And boy did they turn on her. Everyone seemed to be on Mark's side and called Amber unreasonable. Among other things. And I feel like this can be really felt in season 2. Almost all of her past grievances seem to be gone, and the show itself has made her much more understanding to Mark's side, until they of course break up again. And I do like how they handle the breakup in season 2, but personally, something always felt off. I always thought that the overall core of her argument is understandable, but over time, that opinion was diluted by the fan base and the writers. So here I am, committing internet suicide by playing devil's advocate and trying to articulate Amber's point in a hopefully more constructive way. So screw it, let's get it over with. To be clear, I don't think anyone here was the villain. I just think that they were both two people who had fundamental differences in their approach to relationships, which eventually led to their breakup. Okay, so to begin, I don't want to misinterpret what Amber said here, so I'll be verbatim stating what she said, and also I encourage you to go check out the video yourself, just for context. In the show, she makes several claims, but for now, let's begin with this one. She says that the way Mark treated her made her feel stupid and unimportant. Let's analyze this in more detail. Mark in season 1 had many problems, but a large majority of those issues were self-inflicted. He was young and brash, and he thought he could handle a lot more stuff than he really could, whether it be being a superhero, focusing on school, and yes, even Amber. And the entire season is trying to show us that this lifestyle is just not working for him. He was failing school really badly, in high school and in college, to the point where he had to quit college completely. Being a hero was taxing to almost all of his relationships. He saw his friends less often, and yeah, in my opinion, he wasn't the best boyfriend. Here's a really bad metaphor. He was like a juggler, trying to juggle between school, love life, and being a hero. But eventually, they became just way too much to handle. Does that make sense? I don't care. Now, this is not to say that Mark shouldn't be a hero. I think his commitment to the city is very important. In fact, it is the most important thing in his life. The time he takes to study or go on dates is time he could be using to save someone's life. I am not trying to portray Mark as this evil person. He is clearly good. He is someone who, in season 1 at least, is yes, brash to prove himself, but also very brave and always willing to do the right thing, and put himself in harm's way for others. In other words, a born hero. I just think he needs to learn better life balance. Because yes, his current life balance just isn't fair to Amber. No matter what, Amber will always be put in the back burner of Mark's priorities. And if she did wish to make herself a priority, that would be pretty selfish of her, as she is putting her own needs in front of the suffering of others. Obviously, people dying is way more important than their dates. But people are always dying, meaning that no matter what Mark does as Invincible will always be more important than Amber. Just think about that for a second. The position that puts her in. A relationship where her own feelings will never be the top priority, where she's felt to feel selfish for wanting to see her boyfriend more. One where she's not even sure if he might ever come back home one day. Okay, I have spent some time now criticizing Mark here, but I don't want anyone to have the wrong idea. I do think that in this argument, he was treated unfairly. And I think the best way to show this is by moving on to Amber's next point. Telling the truth wasn't enough. So let's do that after the break. This line of telling the truth makes no sense to me. Amber isn't owed Mark's identity. I mean, for God's sakes, they went out for, at that point, a few months. And this is the biggest secret of his life, which connects to his own safety and his heritage. But let's be more precise here. She specifically says telling the truth wasn't enough, implying that even if Mark told her the truth from the very beginning, he still should have done more work to sustain the relationship, such as communicating more effectively and setting boundaries. That way there are no hard feelings when he needs to ditch her to go be a superhero. Because as much as I am willing to always defend Mark for his superheroics, the excuse that he needs to be out there saving people is just that, an excuse. Mark, the world is filled to the brim with heroes. Heroes who, in season 1 at least, are far more qualified than you. If you really wanted to help those people, while also being faithful to Amber, you could have simply called someone else to come take care of it for you. And with a bit more free time, you can now go hang out with Amber. But that being said, there is one glaring issue I seem to be ignoring here. Why is Mark doing all the work? In any good relationship, you're supposed to work together to preserve things. But Amber doesn't really seem interested in doing her part. I mean, the most she does is put up with Mark, and I guess that's something? But she could have done so much more. She knew Mark was invincible, and therefore she also knew all of the struggles he was going through. And instead of just telling him she knew, and using that knowledge to make a better relationship for both of them, she simply lets the lie continue and watches as Mark kind of makes an ass of himself trying to make her happy. I mean, maybe she didn't say anything because she could tell this secret meant a lot to him, and she was simply trying to play along for his sake. But having to play along over time for his sake became tiring. Honestly, I don't know anymore. I know I've been going back and forth on this, but if I wish to portray Amber's point more clearly, I also had to portray Mark's point of view as well. Because the last thing I want is to portray either side as inherently villainous in nature. What I did want to do was to portray Mark and Amber as two different people who wanted different things, which ended with both of them being hurt in the process. I actually have no clue where the show goes from here, but I do hope that, moving forward, they can still be friends. Anyway, guess I'm done. Subscribe and peace.